So today's topic is a bit interesting, ethical hacking. Anyone here got hacked before?
Oh,
That's interesting.
Very much with people downstairs.
right.
Can I make them up behind
Anyone tried to hack before?
You started by saying
Yeah.
thanks.
That part of doing things without consent and doing things with consent differentiate ones from an ethical hacker and an unethical hacker. Like, I showed you the definition, it's pretty interesting. Like, just these two words may draw that borderline between an unethical and ethical hacker. So, for instance, sorry, I'm taking Will's example, Miralles. If I want to pen test Miralles' system, and if I do it without his permission, then it's unethical. If I do it with your permission, it's completely ethical. Thanks for giving permission.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What about the people that hack into people's systems and update all their security things just to like make things more secure? Is that ethical or unethical?
Depends on what they're doing it for.
See, if they're doing it without consent, but they're doing it to make things more secure.
No, it still lies in unethical.
Who does that though?
That's the thing, like people do that. No.
So that's the basic definition of it. And if, how many of you know the 80-20 rule in business? Like 80% of the profit comes from the 20% of the products. In the same way in cybersecurity, you can avoid 80% of the problems with 20% of configurations or 20% of precautions. Those 20% are generally, they are not much. You can count it on your 10 or 15, but those 10 or 15 things to be followed, 90% of the time people don't follow all of them. They will always miss one thing or the other, and that's act as an entry point, or you could say like a entry point for an hacker to get into your system and do a lot many things you cannot imagine of. So how you begin your journey with an ethical hacker? So first thing you do is you think like a hacker, but in an ethical way. So for instance, if I have to hack a system, I'll think like a hacker. Like, what will a hacker do? Suppose I have a system, let's say Facebook login, just a simple example. So I have to consider like what will happen when someone logs into this page, what they're going to do, and how they're going to log in, what input they are going to put, all these test cases and everything. And it's kind of like a continuous process. You cannot do it in one go. You cannot say, okay, I did it today, so I will just sleep and just assume that my system is secure. It's never like that. You have to do it in iteration. Most probably there's a frequency to do it, but it depends on case to case. Like some organization, they might need to do it daily, some might do it monthly, some might do it yearly, so it depends. So you think like a hacker and you follow either of the approaches. So three approach: black box, gray box, and white box. As the name suggests, in black box, you have zero knowledge of the system. Gray box, some knowledge of the system. White box, complete knowledge of the system. And going back to Will again, sorry, I'm using your example again and again. So if I have to do penetration testing on it, on Miralles system, then I'm more like a black box tester because I don't know anything about them, like completely zero knowledge. So when I act as a black box tester, I have two options. Either I go to Will and ask him for more info, or I will just dwell in the same black box. Same for gray box. The main target here is you to try to gain as much information as possible and try to either go to the white box part, or you either try to dwell in the same part and try to find vulnerabilities, as many as possible. So
Just if you started out as a black box problem because of your ethical hacking, you learned part of the system. Does your approach change, or is it still a black box approach?
can you repeat the last part?
So if you've learned about the system, so you know some knowledge,
Yes.
is it still black box testing, or are you now on
Oh no, it's a gray box testing.
Okay. So it's about your knowledge,
Yes.
not what you've been told.
No.
Okay.
It's about my knowledge and also what is being told to me. So, as I said, like you can just transition from one box to other, or you can just dwell in the same box and try to gain as much knowledge as possible and try to just dwell in that same box. But the problem here is like if you dwell in the same box or if you try to do ethical hacking with the same approach. There are pros and cons of each of these boxes. For instance, black box is super costly because the hacker has to spend a lot of time finding a lot of many things, and of course, if you're paying him according to certain rates, then it's super costly in that aspect. Gray box, it's considered somehow as a optimal approach because it's a middle ground of both white box and black box, but somehow some organizations prefer white box because for white box, even it is costly, it is more like giving you complete overview of your vulnerabilities or entire system. So how you start with the black box? Like simple, you just have these things like database servers, firewalls, or application servers. Every application uses that, like almost 99.999, like you name it, it uses it. So you try to attack these first, ethically. Yeah, that's important. Like you need to have a consent first of all before you attack this. And if you don't have consent, you don't do it. So whatever I'm saying is don't try this at home. So you try to attack those and try to find some loopholes in it, or as many loopholes as possible. Most probably you will end up with a brute force approach where because you don't have much knowledge about it, so you need to find more about it, so you might end up with a brute force approach. And if you are dealing with gray box, then in that case you act as a user of the application or someone who has basic information about that application, which involves source code or even credentials or something which allows you to deal with that application on a user level. In the white box approach, this is more like the organization is giving you entire system in your hand, and they're telling you, okay, this is the diagram of the architecture, this is this is that, just do whatever you like. And then this is more feasible because you have a lot of knowledge about it or complete knowledge about it, but it's very costly as well at the same time because you have to find all the vulnerabilities compared to black box, because black box is more like simulating a real world cyber attack, because generally a attacker most probably won't be dealing with the white box approach, you're mostly dealing with the black box approach. But if you want like 100% security or near 100%, there is never 100% actually, near 100% security, you can go with the white box approach. So let's see some interesting tools to do this. Anyone has used these tools before?
Just a quick question on before we go on to that.
Yeah.
In terms of where do you see like phishing and kind of gaining user credentials fitting in terms of that black box approach? Is that something that I guess you wouldn't try and replicate that in an ethical hacking approach? Or
it depends.
not?
It depends. So suppose if that's the requirement by the organization to do a spoofing and then try to do an attack on it, then that's okay. But if it's not a requirement and if you're still doing it, then
it's unethical.
It lies in a grey line area.
Because that's how an unethical hacker would try to gain their knowledge in terms of moving to grey and then to white by gaining those credentials and access to the system.
Yes. But most probably, like whenever you're given a consent, the consent most probably is always the full consent.
Yeah. Okay.
Depending about like at what level the organization is, because some organizations they already have an app deployed and it's well running, so they cannot give a complete consent because it might cause a lot of problem to them.
Yeah.
But some who are still first stage, they give you 100% consent. So it depends like at what level they are.
Sure.
So this tool, Burr, it allows you to do lots of steps that normal person does, but in an automated way. For instance, login, trying to break on the two-factor authentication code and all those things. So Kali Linux, have you heard of this before? Yeah. Oh yeah. So this is another interesting tool. If you're interested in SQL injection or other types of penetration testing, this is really, really interesting tool. SQL map or SQL types of databases, Wireshark and Nmap, they are related with the network loopholes finding and all those things. So you guys are interested for a demo?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
You don't have my consent.
I'll ask him.
Where did you get that gift of Andre from?
I wear glasses.
Okay.
So
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna act as an ethical hacker who is given a consent to test an app from a black box approach, and I'll try to go to a like gather as much information and try to find loopholes in it. So I'll be using SQL map, pretty decent tool. We're going to keep it very simple, so don't worry.
So
Again,
you're teaching us how to ethically hack on the basis that the only difference between ethical and unethical
yes, it's the
is
concept.
permission.
Yes.
Awesome.
Is this
By the way, the permission.
ethical conundrum here?
No, I'm just thinking this is knowledge that's well worth keeping.
It's all about a written legal permission. Yes. Well, I cannot bump onto you like somewhere here and say, oh, can I hack your system? And you say yes, and later I cannot do that. You have to send me like a legal written permission. So let's assume I received an email of a written legal permission to do so.
Sure.
That's ethical, yes.
Okay. Let's go into this. I won't open the code base. I'll just go to the code base the later part. Let's assume that there's an API which is doing some CRUD operation, like create, read, update, delete operation. And my task is to just find some loopholes in it. Now what I'm going to do is, I've done like just a test run before. So I'll use SQL map. SQL map is a Python tool, like written in Python. You can, if you have Python installed, it's very easy to run that tool. Simply I'll run a command, Python SQL map, and most probably like literally near 100% time, the entry point is a URL. It's always a web server URL, or most probably it's a web server URL. So how did I get this URL? Well, I go to the app. On the website of that system, there are specific, generic keywords or generic, you could say words, which most of the systems follows. Like for documentation, they will have docs. In terms of SQL table, for users, they will have users table, something like that. So as a black box tester, I'll try to use these common words first. So I went to their docs website, so I'll go over here, and I'll try to see if they have a dot. Okay, they have a docs. So now this gives me certain information that, okay, there are two API endpoints for now. In that, this is done in fast API, so it's a Python project. So that's another information. Then the API endpoint accepts a dynamic parameter, which is name for a user. And it's a GET request, so most probably it is returning me a detail about the user based on the name I pass. So what I'm going to do is I'll simulate an attack on this. So what I'm going to do, I'll use SQL map, use this URL, and try to simulate an attack on this. So first thing I'm going to do is open a tool, go over here. So this thing says that, okay, attack on this URL on a user endpoint, and as the name is a dynamic parameter, I'm going to use a wildcard entry or something like a custom mapping, which is generally denoted by this asterisk symbol. So with this, I'm asking that, okay, I want to know the current database name of this system. So if I hit enter and if everything is good, most probably, it will ask me again a question. Do you want to do custom injection marker? In case, if you are hacking, again, ethically, if you don't know anything about this, you just press enter. And it will tell you, okay, so the current database name is testDB. So I got the database name. Okay, that's good. Now, next thing is, what are the tables inside this? So I can do, again, something like, instead of current DB, I will say tables. And then, again, it will ask the same question. I'll just enter. And it will give me the list of tables in that database.
Nice.
Now, next thing is, I got the tables, I got the details I want. Now, I want the data of that table or databases. So what I will do? I'll simply say, okay, in the same character side, done, and I'll just hit enter again. And it will take a bit of time, so it will fetch databases tables one by one. Wherever there is a data, it will give back me data. Wherever there are hashes like this, if the hashes, generally the hashed password is irreversible, most probably. It depends upon what password you keep. That's why it's recommended that you always have a strong password. So what I'm going to do is I'll just hit enter and just see if there are any weak passwords. So I'll hit enter, then it will ask me what algorithm I want to use. So I'll say, okay, I want to do dictionary-based attack. And there we go. So it gave me the list of users, with this was the hash and this was the password. So I was able to, and you could say decrypt the password. So I have the password of the user, then I have the email of the user. So I can log into the user.
Just so you know, you shouldn't use your name as password.
I know. I know. It's just an example.
Can I ask a question? Like, how have you got from here's an API and this is what this API does, and obviously I get getting the name and stuff, but to actually being able to get the stuff out of the database? Like, is this an example database that isn't secured with usernames and passwords, or?
So generally, like there are generic templates every software or every application has.
Sure.
So if they have a database,
Mhm.
they will most probably have a table which will store the information about the users
Yeah.
and the passwords itself.
Okay.
And that's actually, so even I say black box testing,
Sure.
it's the knowledge about the system,
Yeah.
not knowledge that I have. So it's most probably like I'm doing some guesswork, and from that guesswork I'm trying to reach here.
Sure, no, that makes sense. It's more like these tables are in a database, but
Yeah.
from how I think of when I've worked with databases that have probably been configured by people much smarter than me that do this, I'd like the tables in the database, even the users tables, you have to be logged into it with a username and password to get to that. So I'm saying, how is this done?
It also depends upon the script you have written.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is an insecure app.
Okay.
So that's what happened like when there's an insecure app. So you try to get into it.
Okay. Yeah.
So now we got the loopholes about it. So let's try to make it secure
Okay.
with just one simple change. So now I'm just gonna change my hat, become an ethically nice person, go to the organization, tell them, okay, these were the vulnerabilities. With this, user can get to your database access, these things can get exposed, so there needs to be certain precautions to be done. So they say, okay, take this code and let us know what are flaws in that. So I got the code, and I went inside the code, I saw the endpoints again, without getting in much depth of it. I just see most of the SQL statements. And any random guess what is the problem here?
The problem is I don't have my glasses.
Is it the problem that you're injecting whatever string is there, so they can just put their own statement in
Yes.
there and terminate and stuff?
Hey, you've not sanitized your inbox first.
That's the
You've not
system website,
sanitized your
yeah.
inbox.
Yes,
You don't accept anything.
exactly. So clearly there's a problem in the query. So let's try to make this query secure somehow. I'm just making one small change. What I'll do, I'll comment this part and uncomment it over here, which I'm going to save some time. Now, the difference between this and this is, when I write an SQL statement and put it there as it is, the statement is considered as a part of your database query statement. And when you use this tool, this SQL map, what it does it behind the scenes run lots of SQL queries. Like per second, it might run hundreds or thousands of SQL queries. So all those queries are executed step by step or one after the other, and then you get results based on that. But when you write something like this, which is known as parameterized queries, those strings or those whatever injected text that comes from the front end or wherever, that thing is considered as a literal text, and it will just get escaped, or it will just be ignored and will be considered as a part of your input value. So let's give a try with this. Save this. Let's go over here, and this time I'll start with the current DB, or let's go with the tables, and I'll go as a fresh queries. Okay. So it did something again. It's trying to get database's name. This time it didn't give me anything. So with just one simple precaution, I avoided like just exposing my table names. So this is just one step. I can take it a step forward by making that input validation, by making sure that, okay, is this, so if I'm asking for name, am I only accepting names? Am I accepting like scripts or some HTML code into it? Then I should parse it, or I should remove it, or I should avoid it. So all these validations, they are important as well. Another important step here is rate limitation. So as we saw with SQL map, it was doing lots of queries. That means lots of lots of server requests. So there should be a rate limiter which says that, okay, after let's say 60 requests per second, it should halt, and it should just halt for let's say for 5 minutes or something like that. So these small thing helps a lot, and somehow you try to make your system secure. So any questions? That's all from me.
How do you make sure that having a more complex passwords makes you safer?
Because there is one row in the database which has a complex password. If I go back here, this is again. There is already there's an injection statement. Generally, it follows like this. So in this case, you'll see it also gives me the other list of records, and it also like this one over here has a secured password. So if you have like strong password, it somehow prevents it, the hash to decrypt it. But it also depends on what algorithm you are using for decryption. So that's why it's recommended to have like a strong password.
So it's not always 100% will save you from attacks, but
Yeah, it will give you extra security, you would say.
So the more robust the system you have, you're likely to get some problem only if you have a problem with data theft, something like that. Someone steals passwords and stuff like that.
Well, this was just one example. If I go with the other one where I can just do infinite request on the server and halt the server, so that's known as a DOS attack. Or if I can also do like a man in the middle attack. Like there are various attacks. So this was just one example. So we just prevented this, and there are lots of things to consider. But bare minimum things, I would say.
Stay away from the pod.
Any more questions?
How much ethical hacking have you done?
A lot.
How much unethical?
No, nothing unethical.
If you mentioned that the white box approach is way more expensive because it supposedly involves more time, what would be genuinely the difference? 10 times more? Or it's just
It
depending on
depends.
the hours?
Yeah, it depends. Because if I take example of big companies, they generally give you some amount based on the one per floor you find. So sometimes it might take you days, sometimes it might take you day, it depends. More time it takes, the more they pay. Or the more strong the floor is, the more they pay. Kind of thing.
Is it pretty much impossible to 100% secure a system?
No.
Because all these big companies we hear about that always have these hacks, massive hacks that take place.
I just read articles. I'm not sure how 100% accurate it is because I didn't work in companies.
Yeah.
There are companies who frequently change their codes.
Yeah.
There are companies who pay literally 6-7 digits to find flaws on a periodic basis. So it's like a recursive process.
Yeah.
And they try to make it try to find a flaw, make it secure. Try to find a flaw, make it secure. So I will say it depends upon it's same thing like making a cloud server available. You can make it near 100%. You cannot make it 100%. So it's all about those 99 points and number of nines in there. Question? Okay. On that note, thank you everyone for coming today.